My name is Christian Williams. I'm one of the members of the board of directors of the Massachusetts Association of Criminal Defense Lawyers, which is interestingly pronounceable as MACDL. We're super excited to be doing a little bit, something a little bit different, not speaking mainly to lawyers, but speaking to community folks that are doing good and awesome work. Me and Shira Diner, who's for me right up there. If you say something, I think you'll show up.
Hi.
You'll show up beside me.
Hi.
No?
Oh, well.
So there you go. Awesome. So we are both on the community engagement subcommittee of the MACDL board. And what we've been trying to do on that committee is work with community groups, but not in a top-down, us lawyers, trying to have community groups do what we want them to do, but maybe more the other way around, that we as kind of lawyers with access to power in a lot of ways, listening to what the community wants. And hopefully this is something that the community wants. So this is our first kind of foray into actually doing something tangible. So we're really excited about it. And we really would welcome your feedback for how this goes and where we could go in the future with things like this or further with this topic specifically. And so I'm going to put my contact information in the chat right now, as well as a link to the materials for this course. And I'll warn you that that's not going to stay up permanently. I'm going to keep that up for maybe a couple of weeks because it's just my personal drive. So if you want it, get it now. So the presentation is going to be on there. There's some public records that I've acquired that you can just kind of peruse out of curiosity. There's a great checklist by David Nathanson, who you're going to hear from in just 1 minute. And then there's a very messy kind of list of places for information and sample public records in my document. So today what we're going to do is we're going to hear from
Can I say one quick thing? Can I say one quick thing before you introduce? So I put my contact information in the chat. Of course, I messed it up because I'm so technologically not savvy, but my email's there. And we are planning on sending out a survey at the end of afterwards sometime next week, probably to everyone who's here, just seeing if there's other topics that would be helpful to your work and your organizing work that we could try and help provide, or other ways you think we might be able to engage with you. So we really appreciate any sort of feedback you can give us, and we'll get that survey out and go from there. And I can't stop smiling. I'm just really excited about this. And it's so great to see so many wonderful groups represented here who are doing such fantastic work. And I just feel really humbled and honored to be in the room.
Awesome, thanks.
I'm done talking.
No, thanks. So first we're going to hear from David Nathanson, who's going to speak for about 45 minutes on public records requests. He's someone who has a lot of experience, definitely done this kind of presentation before, usually or always for lawyers. This is his first time doing it for real people. And then we're going to hear from Nathaniel Story, who created the Woke Windows website, and he's going to show us what that website is about, but really tracking information specifically about the Boston Police Department. And it's really a great resource, definitely to us as criminal defense lawyers, but I'm sure it's also been used by community folks too. I'm less familiar with that. And somewhere in between those two, I am going to do a dynamic public records request so you can actually see one live in action. I have a canned one that I'm thinking of using, but I would much rather do one that someone suggests. So we'll see if we can pull that off. If someone wants to send me some requests, you need to tell me kind of who it is and what you might want, but it's going to be me doing the request. So the information is going to come to me. I could probably contact you in the future, but just to see how it is really done. I'll try to do a quick one of those when David is done speaking. So definitely feel free to send a chat directly to me about something that you would like to see requested, and from who, because it might be some organization that I don't know what it is, some government agency. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to David.
All right, cool. So thank you everybody for coming. And it really is sort of appropriate that this particular program is sort of the kickoff of MACDL's community engagement, because the public records law is something that's sort of power that's been wielded in the hands of lawyers, but it's not meant for lawyers. It's meant for everybody. And so with that, I'm gonna start sharing my screen because we're gonna get right into it. So here we go. All right, the Massachusetts Public Records Statute, actually, it says August 2020, but I've actually updated a little bit since then because actually the Public Records Law changed in January, and it changed not particularly because of what lawyers were doing, but because of what the community was demanding in terms of police accountability. So some things that were not public before August 2020 or before January of this year are now public. And that was some of that was in the police reform bill. I wasn't a fan of everything that was in the police reform bill, but that was one thing. So yes, public records make me happy. They should make you happy too. It's easy, it's fun. And that sounds like a very nerdy thing to say, but if you're like me, you really enjoyed, maybe in high school, just sort of being the wise ass, right? Like, oh, really? Is that really what you mean? And public records is really a sort of an outgrowth of that. So how do you do it? Again, this is designed for lay people to use. It's not designed for lawyers. So all you have to do is ask. A telephone call technically is a public records request. Normally we do them in writing in some way so that if they get denied, it's easier to appeal. And because you have some record of what you actually requested. So, people don't try to avoid the request. But key points, you don't have to give a reason. If it's public, it's public. You don't have to say why you want it. There are lots of exemptions to public records law. So, certain things are not public, not your problem. Ask for what you want. Let them tell you it's not public. What are they going to do? Hit you? No. They'll say, we don't think this is public, and you may disagree. So just ask for what you want. Now, that in mind, part of what we'll learn going forward in this presentation is, some of the things that might cause them to say, what you're asking for is not public, and how to avoid framing your request in a way that will cause them to stonewall you. So avoiding pitfalls. Again, this is not for lawyers. You don't have to cite cases. You don't have to cite statutes. If you do, cool, but it's not required. The biggest bummer of all of this is that search fees are allowed. And there is a schedule of fees that's in the statute itself. There are ways to avoid some of those fees. I think there should be some sort of statutory fix for this. And I've been pushing with some legislators about this, but it's not the law now. But, to me, if it's a public record, then the public should be able to have access to it, regardless of whether or not you're indigent. If you're an indigent person, you're still part of the public, and you should be entitled to have the records that you're asking for. But that's not the law now. They're allowed to charge both sort of a labor fee, which is the lowest qualified, the hourly fee of the lowest qualified employee to do the search, and also a per page fee. So let's see, they're supposed to respond within 10 days. They never do. They sort of give you these sort of partial responses, and Christian and I in particular are kind of exercised about that of, they give you these responses like, we've received your request. Yeah, that's probably not good enough. We'll talk about that some more. And if it's denied, you can appeal, and it is not a big deal. It's just a letter. So let's talk about these in a little more detail. So the supervisor of public records is not terrible. It is a it's an arm of the Secretary of the Commonwealth, Secretary of the State, and any other state. And while they are a government agency, their mission is supposed to be making sure that the public records law is followed. They often do make sure that the public records law is followed. Sometimes they don't do what we want them to do, but they're not a disaster. They are sometimes very helpful. So they have these materials there. You'll Chris, you're going to put up this actual PowerPoint, right? You're going to put up the PowerPoint in
Yes,
the
it's already
materials?
up. Yes, it's
Okay,
already up.
excellent. All right. So
And can I just add one thing? Miss Puccini,
don't
the
screw-
Secretary of the Commonwealth, told me an auto response of acknowledgement is not enough to get over the 10-day hurdle.
all right, fantastic. And that's what you get a lot. So anyway, so these materials that are actually, there's a separate public records division of the Secretary of the Commonwealth on their website. They have good materials. They may not be as aggressive as maybe the four of us think about the public records law, but I've generally found them to be accurate and not misleading. So how can you use public records? It's so much fun. The list is endless. So wherever there's government, there's public records. So you just think about what you want. Now, this presentation was geared towards criminal defense lawyers and how can we investigate our cases, investigate particular police officers or particular police operations, particular departments, particular practices. Government is a lot of things beyond as well. So timesheets, databases, manuals, policies, all these things, are public record unless they're specifically exempted for some specific reason. So what is public and what's not? Now, what I'm about to give you, again, is a list that's sort of geared towards criminal defense lawyers. So don't think that if I say, all this stuff is public, those are the only things that are public. Absolutely not. No way, not even close. But for my purposes, police reports created prior to the initiation of a criminal charge, that's public. Reports of a closed investigation. They fight about this, but closed investigations are public. Internal affairs documents, public. It's actually gotten better, is what I was talking about. It used to be a limited set of internal affairs documents were public. Now it's more. Docket numbers of cases. Now, particularly with community members, I suspect that there's maybe some mixed feelings about court records and charges and things like that. Where criminal defense lawyers, we want to know everything so that we can figure out who's been charged with what, and go and aggressively defend our cases. Whereas, community members are coming at it from a different angle, and maybe want to make sure that people have that clean slate. And so who's been charged with what, and in court records, they would rather that stay more less public. And so the law actually creates a balance in that, and that's the Corey law, and we're going to talk about that. But docket numbers of cases with particular charges, but notice docket numbers only. So if you request a list of docket numbers of cases in which, I did this once, in which the Attorney General's office has prosecuted extortion, because I thought that they were singling out client for political activity and calling it extortion. And so, also private people, not public employees, but private people who the government has paid. In the criminal defense world, frequently experts get gobs and gobs of money for saying things that the government likes. We can find out how much have they been paid. So we'll have a fun list at the end. So what's not public? And we talked about this. Core information. Core information is information about an identifiable individual. So if it's not an identifiable individual, it's not exempt by the Corey law. Investigatory material. So, right, I mean, you can't interfere with an investigation by filing a public records request. But again, if the investigation is over, well, then you're not interfering with an investigatory material. So, unwarranted invasion of personal privacy. That is something that actually BPD used to use a lot to shield officers who had been charged or brought up on internal affairs charges because of domestic violence situations. That is no longer acceptable under my reading of the new statute, and that may have been a factor in what recently happened with the failed nomination of the nominated police commissioner. So reports of sexual assault, they are not public ever for any reason. They're just not. There's a statute that specifically exempts them. So not public. So what is the public record statute? Well, it's General Laws, Chapter 66, Section 10. And so here's the definition of it, but I really want to point you to the underlined portion, because what many record holders will say is, well, there's stuff in there that's exempt. I'm not giving you the record. Nope, can't do that. They have to either redact or segregate a portion of the record and then give you the rest. So, have your antenna up for that. If they completely deny a request, which Christian is going to show you how to do, if they completely deny a request, your automatic response is, what do you mean? The entire document is exempt? That can't be. It is rare that an entire document is not disclosable. So, right, you have to reasonably describe the record. But again, you're entitled to ask for help from the record holder about what do you have? I don't know. How do I know what to ask you for? You tell me what categories of information you have. Now, it can be a little bit daunting and difficult to get that answer, but you are entitled to the answer. So let's see. Yeah, reasonable fee, blah, blah, blah. Oh, hold on. Yeah, okay. So there's a statute that defines what a public record is. We talked about unwarranted invasion of personal privacy. Right. So this is the new change. This subclause shall not apply to records related to a law enforcement misconduct investigation. That's new for this January. Investigatory materials we talked about. Again, investigatory materials that would probably so prejudice the possibility of effective law enforcement that it would not be in the public interest. So, and Christian actually pointed out to me that we really need to, if we're looking for materials that maybe are investigatory, well, what do you mean? Like, it's not even possible to effectively enforce the law if you give me these records? That's a pretty high bar. And also public interest. We'll talk about that later, but it's all over the statute. Right. Also exempt are things that are likely to jeopardize public safety or cybersecurity. I don't know if I talk about this later in the presentation, but that public safety exemption, it sounds like it could swallow the whole thing. It does not. Our courts have made very clear that the public safety exemption is for things that are particularly sensitive, like blueprints of a building. that, maybe is used for a public safety purpose. So home address, personal email address, home telephone number of employees, right, and that's exempt. So what's the biggest hurdle? Can you guess? Right, it's Corey, right? And not Corey Woods, Raekwon, Corey Feldman, Corey Hart. So yeah, the Corey statute, we talked about it a little bit. So again, it's an identifiable individual. If there's not an identifiable individual in the record, then it's not Corey. And so this is new as well. Initiation, the information has to be created in the record or recorded as a result of the initiation of criminal proceedings. So if it's before the initiation of criminal proceedings, it's public. And in fact, even if criminal proceedings are initiated, but then dismissed before arraignment, that's also public. So that's the way I read that. And I believe that was intended to respond to some of the Globe investigations of the dismissal of criminal charges against some police and court officials prior to arraignment. So Corey information does not include, and therefore is public, evaluative information, statistical and analytical reports, files in which individuals are not named. So, right, and there's a new-ish section as well. So information regarding people under 18 is not public. So unless the person was convicted in superior court, there's a specific procedure where people under 18 are moved to superior court called the youthful offender proceeding. Otherwise, they're in juvenile court. And so, right, even if this information is created as the result of criminal proceedings, blah, 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 if the person ends up only being charged with something that's not punishable by incarceration, most common example is sort of a city or a town bylaw that only has a fine. Again, that's public. So yeah, we talked about this. So also, right, information created prior to charge, we talked about that. Information regarding yourself. You are entitled to your own Corey. So even if everybody else in the world is not entitled to the police's file on you, you are entitled to the file on you. And I have to tell you, I think a lot of people are, particularly as to like, people have thought about FBI files. Should I request my FBI file? I've never done that, but requesting your own Corey information from a state agency, I've never had to create a problem. So if you're interested in seeing on what the police have on you, I think you should feel free. Information regarding deceased individuals. Corey protection ends, and therefore records are public when someone dies. You may have to prove that the person is dead, and sometimes that's actually hard. Sometimes there's a death certificate. I actually had a case where I had to use a service called Find a Grave because the person died at home, and they were in some rural county in Texas, but God bless the Mormons. They really love their genealogy. And they went and tracked down all the gravestones in this website, and they posted pictures, and I found the person. So I was able to prove that the person was dead, and I got their Corey information. So we talked about evaluative information, intelligence information. So examples, right. Pre-arraignment dismissals, the booking photos, incident reports are public. We talked about not punishable by incarceration. So this next one is a little bit inaccurate because this is the old law. The internal affairs complaints, notes, and the interviews are public record. This is even under the old law. Now you get even more than that. Before you couldn't get the final decision and things like that. Now you can. So it's not worth explaining why you couldn't under the old law, because now you can. Daily logs or arrest registers are public. We talked about docket numbers, alphabetical index, stale investigation. If something, there's a privacy exemption, certainly. But if something is super publicized and everybody already knows all about it, that privacy exemption no longer applies. And another thing that is very helpful these days and really allows Nate to do the awesome work that he does is extracting data from a database is public. They don't get to say like, well, we don't have a record because there's nothing on paper printed down. No, just because it's in your computer doesn't mean it's not a record and it's not public. So what is not public? Corey, home address of criminal justice personnel is specifically excluded. Grand jury materials are excluded. Anything sexual assault is excluded. People under 18, we talked about that, is excluded. This no special treatment for criminal defendants. This is probably not worth going into this a whole lot, but as you might expect, criminal defense lawyers and some criminal defendants try to use the public records law to their advantage, and that. But just as it's your right, it also means that you only get what any member of the public would be entitled to get, plus your own records. Just because you're a criminal defendant in a case in which, Mary Smith might be a witness against you, doesn't mean that you're entitled to, through the public records process, all the records of Mary Smith. Now, maybe in your criminal case through discovery, you can records of Mary Smith, but not through the public records law unless they're otherwise public. And it's not even worth talking about this, but there's a exemption about there's sort of a vague exemption where, like, if there's not really an exemption, but there should be because it's like close to other things that are exempt, then maybe we'll make up an exemption. I hate it. I don't want to talk about it because it makes me angry. So a work product, we're going to skip that. That's a very lawyerly concept, is lawyers. So be aware that it's a thing. So the fees, everybody, this is a concern. I mean, I've already flagged it. So this is keep in mind, this is a presentation that I created for criminal defense lawyers working on appointed cases. So CPCS will not just reimburse anybody in the public, for their public records request. No, it has to be that, a lawyer was appointed to represent somebody, and the attorney has made a public records request to help advance their representation of that person. So everybody else is kind of on their own, which is wrong. It's not the way it should be, and we should change that. But as it stands right now, yeah. But frequently, very frequently, and I love the information that Christian just gave us, is that if you don't get a response within 10 days, which very frequently happens, they are not allowed to charge you a fee. And what they will frequently do is they'll try and route you through their website. They call it a portal. so Boston Police, and actually Boston City government generally has this portal. And they want you to sign up, and then you submit your request, you type it up into the website, and then they'll immediately email you, or through the portal give you an auto response that says, we've received your request. We may respond on time, we may not, and we may charge you fees, we may not. The records you request may be exempt. Well, that's a big fat nothing. And so I love that Christian actually inquired with the Secretary of the Commonwealth. And in fact, that is not a sufficient quote unquote response to take them out of the responsibility of eating those fees if they don't give you a real response within 10 days. Now, do they have to give you the actual records within 10 days? No. But they do have to give you a real response that says, there are 6 boxes and 500 pages each, and it's going to take us 2 weeks, and the employee that's going to do this works at $25 an hour, so something like that. There is the first 2 hours are free if it's a municipal employee. The first 4 hours are free if it's a state employee. And you absolutely can and should ask for a waiver of fees in the public interest. Now, you'd have to, explain what's the public interest that you're talking about. Reporters are frequently able to do that, but it's not just reporters. So, if it's a public record, it's probably not that hard to come up with a reason why it's in the public interest. Let's see, and our courts have said specifically that where you're looking into official misconduct, that is absolutely public interest. So keep that in mind. Let's see. So how do you appeal? It's just a letter and email. Oh, and on that note, we were talking about, well, I'll just go back to it. We were talking about, they use these portals, and they route you through their little website, and you type in your request, and then you don't have a record of what you actually requested. So either, save your actual request somewhere other than their website, copy it and print it on a different piece of paper, make a PDF, take a screenshot, whatever it is that you want to do. So preserve your actual request. And then when they respond, preserve in some way your response, because that makes it easier to then appeal if they deny you, right? Because then you can just shoot an email over to the Secretary of the Commonwealth. You attach your PDF or your screenshot, and you say, look, this is what I requested. This is their response, and that's it. Now, what's fun is, and you can get lost in this, is the decisions of the Secretary of the Commonwealth. They actually post their decisions on appeals of public records requests where the record holder has denied access to a public, and you can get some fun ideas about what people are requesting. I see Nate, he's grinning. It's making him very happy already. It's fun just to, if you just feel like being nosy, just poke around in there and you can find some crazy stuff. And if you're unclear about a record holder not responding, or how to frame what you really want to say, or is this a valid exemption, you can actually call the attorney Angela Puccini, who is one of the attorneys that works in the Public Records Division. That's her office number, and she's a very nice person, and you can talk to her. There are other attorneys that work there too, many, at least 4 or 5. And they all seem, you know, dedicated public servants. And they will talk to you. But an appeal is just an email that says, look, this is what I requested. This is their response. And, you know, you can try to explain yourself, but you don't necessarily have to explain yourself. You can just say, I think it's public. Now, me being a lawyer, you know, I can't shut up. And I tend to explain myself, you know, no, this absolutely is public. It's, you know, the person is deceased, or it's not you know, the record isn't an identifiable individual, or it's not an unwarranted invasion of privacy. You know, and you'll see what the Secretary of the Commonwealth says. Now, let's see. All right, we talked about the public interest. Let's see. It's all throughout the public records statutes. Yeah, we talked about official misconduct is when public interest is at their apex. Right. Again, we talked about this earlier, but they like to ask who you are. And I have to tell you, they continually ask. I was just talking with another attorney this week about, you know, a police department asking, well, who are you? Well, none of your business. Like, you know, you're not entitled to know who I am. I mean, you have to know who I am to give me the records, but other than that, like, I don't have to tell you if I'm an attorney or whose attorney I am or why I want to know. So let's see, right. And keep in mind, exemptions are not, you know, they're not the word of God. They can be overridden. And if public interest is substantially outweighing a privacy interest, for example, well, an exempt record can still be given over. Now, that's almost certainly the Secretary of the Commonwealth who will be making that determination. Rarely a record holder will agree with that, but just keep that in mind. Okay, people really know, they know about public records because they think about FOIA. FOIA is for federal records. What we've been talking about is only for state and local Massachusetts agencies. Federal agencies, the FBI and so forth, are governed by FOIA, which that's the actual citation to the statute. It's similar, it's not the same. Hate it, it's much more complicated, but there's a number of great organizations, but Epic is one of them. They have publications on their website that you can look at and download, and it's quite similar, but it's a more restrictive, in my experience, regime, and you get a lot more resistance, and the process of challenging a denial is harder. But you know, go nuts, you got nothing to lose. So okay, this is one of my favorite examples. So this was back when criminal defense lawyers remember this, but maybe not other people. But back in 2008, when Martha Coakley was the AG, she was challenging, she was arguing to the US Supreme Court that the drug lab, the testing that's done by the drug lab is it's done by machines, it's automatic, like we follow all of the required technical procedures and protocols, and like there's nothing, you know, there's no human element to this. So we don't need to have our drug analysts come into court and testify. We should just be able to spit out a piece of paper and convict people of drug offenses based on that piece of paper that says, this is cocaine, you know, this is amphetamine, whatever. And that didn't smell right to me. in terms of the assertion of like everything is being done right. So I said, well, what are your accreditations? And that was my public records request to the Massachusetts Drug Lab. So they respond. They respond. The drug laboratories are not currently accredited by an external certification body. I'm sorry, what? Okay. That actually, I gave that information at the time to the defense attorneys who were arguing the case, Melendez-Diaz versus Massachusetts, in the Supreme Court. So is Mary Rogers, who's an attorney here in Massachusetts, and Jeff Fisher, who's like this noted Supreme Court guru. And they put it in their brief. And it actually makes it into the opinion. So they say, we follow this SWIG drug, is a scientific working group for the analysis of seized drugs, it's for short, SWIG drug. And the Supreme Court took notice and they said, okay, we use SWIG drug. Okay, but that, and they say, okay, but that still requires some sort of human judgment. And they actually ruled for the defendant in that case, saying, no, the analysts actually have to come in and testify. You can't just convict somebody on a piece of paper that says this is drugs. But defenders, we didn't like that. We kept digging, and what happens? We get Annie Dukin and Sonia Farrick, who were responsible for tens of thousands of convictions that were wrongful. You know, dry labbing, not real drugs, you know, using the drugs. And so, you know, I didn't litigate any of those cases. I didn't trust what they were saying about the lab. And, you know, other people picked up the ball and kept pushing and pushing and pushing and pushing. And people were pushing before that too. And, you know, so this is one of the things that, you know, sometimes you know, a public record will be a little thread that you can start pulling at, and you never know where it'll lead. So it's super easy. And this is one of Christian's requests. You know, what police officer has a cell phone? I request a list of all Quincy Police Department officers that have department issued cell phones. You can't find out what their private cell phone is because it's not a government record, but you absolutely can find out who has a department issued cell phone. So get a list. Here's a request for internal affairs records. Use of force reports. You'll notice that the date there, I think that's no accident, the way Christian phrased that report. This was all around the George Floyd sparked protests about Black Lives Matter, loss or destruction of property. Okay, here's a sample of appeal. This one, don't get intimidated by this one. This is one that I got very lawyerly about. So I'm just going to go past that. And I think that's really all I got. So I don't know, Christian, are you back?
I'm here.
All right.
There was one question that I answered, but it's what we lawyers do.
Yeah.
We don't know the answer. We just answer it and we don't know. So does Boston resist if you request gang database information? Do they routinely deny that?
You know, I haven't had to resist. I haven't had to request gang database information. They almost certainly will suggest that it's intelligence, which
Right.
in itself is not Corey, but they will say that it's
Ongoing
investigatory
investigation, yeah.
and therefore exempt.
So
Right.
what I said,
You can
what I
find it
said
out.
is request it and see what they say. Request it. That was my answer, really.
100%. Yep. 100%.
So I just wanted to clarify, I did send the link. I'm hoping maybe if someone could try it, because it's hard for me to try it because it's my link. But if someone could click on that and make sure there is extra stuff in that link, actually, interestingly, we didn't work this out, but it was some of the things that David was just talking about. The results of some of those public records requests, I just put them out there to get everybody excited. So there's a list of the Boston Police Department officers who have cell phones. There's the information about the Boston Police Department's drone program and their $18,000 or $13,000 thermal camera, and the Quincy Police Department officers that have cell phones. But there is also David's PowerPoint is also in that folder. And so now I wanted to do a request. So, but
and Chris, there just everyone seems a bunch of people checked it and were able to find the PowerPoint, so we are all good.
And if someone is really having a problem, just email me. I'll put my email in there again, and I'll make sure that you get it. I'm C Williams, IAMS @law.harvard.
Oh, someone has an idea for a request.
Go for it. Give it to me. But you got to tell me where, because I'm going to try to do this very quickly.
All right. Maybe,
okay. I guess
Laura,
that's
do you want to unmute yourself?
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay, so I don't know how to frame this, and so you can help. I'm interested in knowing about the school resource officers in the Newton Public School District over, let's say, 5 years by race. How many students were, now I don't know the right words, questioned, detained, arrested, reported by school resource officers in the school district of Newton? Is that something that we can ask for?
That is a little bit of a complicated request because I don't know if I can just retype exactly that. So you want to know what are those incidents of what you're saying? What are those things called? Like a what?
I think like interactions, like Newton interactions by Newton Police Department School Resource or Newton Public School School Resource Officer interactions over a period of time.
Well, I don't know what an interaction would be. I mean, if a school police officer, helps a student deal with their father's anger management problems, which they claim to do all the time, would that be an interaction or not? I'm more interested in the police in schools who are doing police work.
Yeah.
So not non-police interactions, but police interactions like questioning, detaining, arresting, or reporting, like when they put students' names into police records based on them having developed relationships with students within schools. That's really problematic.
I'm just, so this is, it's like, I could say, I want a list of all of the police officers who have entered Newton Public Schools in the last year or something, because this is one of those record requests where they're going to say that's too much work. We have to look through 9,000 reports and it's going to take a lot. So the way I would approach this, and it's also because I don't completely understand exactly what you want, I would ask a very coarse grained thing, like how many times did the Newton Police Department respond to a Newton school in the last, because it's already going to be a lot. I don't know, maybe I don't know.
We have
in the
4
last year.
police officers that are stationed at the schools. We have 4 dedicated school resource officers. So they're at the schools, but we don't know what they're doing there. On the state level, we have some indication that they're part of the school to prison pipeline, that they are documenting things they learned through their trusted relationships with students in school, and they're documenting them in ways that later can get them in legal trouble. But how can we know what, what they're doing?
So this is the Newton. I don't think I'm going to be able to capture your total request, but just to give you an idea. So let's see. I want to say everything is okay. So how many
Kristen, can I make a suggestion?
Sure.
So if I were to do this, I would view this as a series of public records requests.
I agree.
And so I think I probably would just say, I want a list of all police reports. I don't want the reports. I want a list of the reports. So they number their reports. A list of all police reports associated with address. And the address that you give is the various Newton public schools that have school resource officers, or just, and then you make a follow-up one that says, or you can say, authored by, if you know who the Newton school resource officers are, that were authored by XYZ officer, right? And then you make a follow-up that says, I would like, here are, 53 police reports that I have the number for. I would like, in the aggregate, the how many of these students were white, how many of these students were black, how many of these students were Hispanic. These are the kinds of things, like sometimes you have to chop it up, and you often, and I think Christian, you probably get this too, once you start making them count things, that's when they start pushing back, because they count.
So let me get
Anyway,
my
that was my
email right.
suggestion. Hopefully.
No, that's great. I think I followed that. Law.harvard.edu, name. That's my that's my phone number. That's fine. It'll be recorded into this whole thing and my home address. I'm not going to put my address. So hopefully they email me.
You want to start your screen share again, Christian?
Ooh, I lost it.
Oh. I turned it off. It wasn't working.
Oh, let's see. Screen 2, share. Can you see that?
Yes,
Can people
great.
see? Okay, so I said I want a list of all police reports associated, if I spelled associated wrong, associated with any and all Newton police school, Newton public schools authored by a Newton police school resource officer during the years of, and then I just put like a very wide frame, in fact. I said this is going to go to the city clerk. I found if things go to the city clerk, that it's kind of okay, and they direct it to the right people. And then also, I think they also look at it. I don't know if that helps or not. In Boston, I get an idea, maybe it does. I put my name, I put my phone number, and I'm not going to put all this other stuff because I don't actually have to. I don't even have to honestly put my phone number even.
Christian, and so what I often try and cut them off at the knees. And so if it were me, I would say I exclude from my request any reports of sexual assault, because they're not going to give it to you anyway. And so that way you don't give them the opportunity to say, you can't get it, and then just like stop.
So, I mean, that's not, I don't think that's 100% exactly what you're asking for, but I think both David and I agree, kind of account setup. Oh, so now I have to, I don't really want to do this. I really don't want to do this. Okay, so I'm going to leave that. That's just dealing with the form. And also this is why we don't like to use the forms. We like to do it. And if I probably looked a little bit better, I could have found the email address to send it to. Oh, actually, I just got an email back from them, an autoresponder email. So, I mean, really, I think that's the point. Again, that was kind of a complicated one to do, but I think the better thing to do is simplify it. Don't try to ask for something specific if you don't know what it is yet. Get a broad kind of request, start getting some information, and it's not like it's not like this very targeted thing where you're going to go in and pluck out the exact data that you want. You're going to get like a big set of data, read through that, figure out something, do another request, and then make I don't know. It makes me think of like sculpting. You're just chipping off little pieces at a time. Okay, so now I'm going to turn it over to Nate to tell us about his awesome website.
Hi there. Thank you. That was a great presentation, Dave, and thank you for doing the live request, Chris. Thank you for handing it over to me. So I just want to introduce myself. My name is Nathan Story, and so you just heard from the lawyers, and I am not a lawyer at all. I'm just a computer programmer who just got really into public records starting last year. And I'm really here just to kind of show off my website called Woke Windows. And let me just start sharing that. Can you see that?
Yes.
Awesome. So starting last year, I created this website called Woke Windows, where I've been collecting public records and other sort of data sets about the Boston Police Department specifically. I've taken those data sets and I've kind of combined them into one like big interconnected resource where you can kind of peruse them and where you can kind of follow the links between records and how everything comes together. Now, I'm kind of presenting this here today because, you know, it's like because I want to share something cool and I think that could be useful for all of you out there. But also, I think it's a really good concrete example of what a layman like me can do with public records requests and how you don't need to be a lawyer and how you can just make these requests and get like a lot of interesting information. So let me just start off by kind of showing off the site here. So the big thing about Woke Windows is that we collect information about police officers at the Boston Police Department. And we have a feature here that to look them up. So this is my big list of sworn officers and civilian employees of the Boston Police Department. You can see here that's about 3,600 people listed, 3,600 employees here. That includes people from the various rosters that we've gone over time. So most of them are active employees, but some of them are like since retired. I think we have like rosters going back just to 2015. You can see you got the kind of big list here with the name and everything. And we have more information. By default, the whole thing is sorted by the kind of the earnings in 2019. There's the 2020 data is out, but I haven't imported that yet. And you can kind of see like, yeah, there's some big earners at the top here. So I'm just kind of go through and kind of show you kind of some examples of what you can do with this. So if I take this, the top guy here, Mr. Curvin, you can kind of see the information that we've brought together. You can see kind of his start date here, his ID number, his rank. You can see just the zip code of where he lives. That's something that's in the employee earning reports from the city of Boston. So you can kind of see which officers live inside Boston and in the community and which live outside in the suburbs. And we've collected here a lot of data from internal affairs logs. You can see these are sustained findings by the Internal Affairs Division and cases related to this police officer. We've collected news coverage. So you have articles that mention him by name. That's sort of the more of the earnings data, how much made over the past since 2011. That's as far back as I have data for. Not for him, but for like incident reports, paid details. I have data just for 2019 currently at paid details worked. Scroll down here. Again, the complaints, newspaper articles. I can show you if we zoom in on one of these paid details, you can get kind of the full information here of where it was worked. Hopefully that's right. Sometimes the geocoding can be a little off, turning the address into a location on the map. But I think something that's very cool that you can do with this tool is you can come and you can go to you can actually see the source materials where this information came from. So this is a particular paid detail. You can click here. You can see this is like information about that particular data source. Click through here and you can see on the site Muckrock, this is me requesting the record back in June, or requesting the records back in June. And you can kind of see, so this is a site Muckrock, which is a great resource that everyone should look at. It's an easy way to make public records requests yourself, but it's also a great way to see public records requests made by other people, which can give you some great ideas of requests to make. You scroll down here and you can get kind of that you can get that spreadsheet, right, where that data comes from. So you can trace it to anything you see on the Woke Windows website, you can trace back to the original records and see where it came from and do the analysis yourself. Then go back here. We also have the ability to sort by these different fields. For instance, this is the number of paid details each officer worked in 2019. You can use that to see kind of which officers work the most paid details. See, there's some pretty high numbers here. I don't exactly know how you work 426 in a year, but we can kind of zoom in on that and look at and kind of scroll through this information, right? See on each day where this person worked. We also have saying the data sources, tracing it back. I have a big list of kind of public records from the Boston Police Department that both that requests that I've made, but also requests that other people have made that I've kind of indexed and gone through and posted here. So, and including stuff that's not like kind of ingested in the site and made into something pretty, like for instance, like parking tickets. It's kind of interesting to see the parking tickets issued in Boston, but it's mostly done by parking enforcement officers. So it's not kind of that relevant, but it's a lot of interesting data you can look through if you want. And similar, and kind of, and where it's useful, we've kind of broken down the meaning of different fields as far as we can to kind of guide you through all this kind of interesting data out there so that you can use it for your own purposes. We've also have, for all the data that's on the site, we also provide kind of spreadsheets of it that are better documented. So for instance, this table has FIOs by Boston police officers. Now originally you can go back to the original spreadsheets that the Boston Police Department provides, and that's actually on the data.boston.gov data portal, and you can download that. But it's a separate file for each year, and the file format changes from year to year as it came from different systems. Well, we have kind of a combined file here that you can search and kind of draw your own conclusions from, and kind of documented all the different fields present. This is an open source project. Everything that is the source code. If you're a developer, it's all here for you to like contribute to if you'd like to, like contribute code or fork or just browse. It's all open source and freely distributed. And we have, there's a whole bunch of data sources that we ingested, over a dozen, to kind of bring all that data in and link it together and present on Boston police officers. And that's kind of all I have to say.
That's great.
If there's any questions, sorry.
Yeah, are there any questions for Nate and about the site? Someone can put it in the chat, or I don't know if people have permission to speak to. Either way.
They can speak.
Or maybe raise your hand too. Either, any of those things are fine.
Well, I have a question for Nate. So Nate, do you, when you make your requests, are you specifically asking them to send you data files, and that's how you're able to translate it?
Yeah, usually I say like my preferred format is a spreadsheet of some sort, like, Excel spreadsheet or a CSV file. I mean, sometimes they just don't do that. I know other people will really fight through the appeals process, right? They'll say like, no, I wanted the spreadsheet, don't give me this PDF. Like I haven't fought that much, because I'll just kind of do the legwork of I'll write a program to try to turn the PDF back into a spreadsheet. But yeah, generally that's what I'm looking for.
Mm-hmm.
So if there are other questions, definitely feel free to put them in the chat, or maybe raise your hand. But there were a few questions about appeals. So David, do you, I mean, I can answer it, but did you want to just kind of speak to appeals? Because 2 or 3 people had questions about the appeals process.
Yeah, I mean, I'll try and be brief, because I know you have thoughts as well. But the process, like I said, you don't have to do much. You can just say, I think this is public. But now somebody did raise the very vexing problem of you go to the appeals division of the Secretary of the Commonwealth, you send your little email, they agree with you, and then nothing happens. Well, like, okay. So what you should do is first follow up with the record holder saying, you received, this decision that says you have to give me this record. I haven't gotten it. Please give it to me. And by that point, you likely will have gotten an email from a specific attorney at the Secretary of the Commonwealth. CC them. And if you then don't get a response from them, and you put a particular date, say, can you please respond to me within 5 business days or something like that. And then if you don't get a response, go back to that attorney and say, I made this request, you ordered them to respond, they didn't respond. Now, unfortunately, the actual power of the Secretary of the Commonwealth is fairly limited. And I think that's something that needs to change. And I think we should be advocating for it. The Attorney General does have the power to a lawsuit to enforce the public records law, and as do private people. But, that's a daunting prospect as a private person. And as far as I know, the Attorney General rarely actually files suit. I'm only aware of one time where the Attorney General filed such a lawsuit. The Boston Globe and other news organizations, they have attorneys, on retainer, who filed those lawsuits for them. If you have to go that route, you have to pay an attorney to actually get a court order that says you have to turn this over. And that's daunting. And I've actually been advocating with legislators that the law needs to be changed so that either or both the Secretary of the Commonwealth has real enforcement power to fine, power to compel, something like that, and or there needs to be some sort of fee provision where if somebody files a public records lawsuit and wins, well, then the agency should have to pay the attorney's fees, not the person who filed the suit. So these are all things that I've been thinking about, but those that's not the law. So you put your finger on a real daunting problem of agencies just brazenly ignoring direct orders to turn over particular records. It happens. So what do you do about it, Christian?
But they are. I know neither of us has rose-colored glasses on any of this, but post the criminal law reform, it has been way better, way better. I don't know who lit a fire under whose ass, but at least I get responses now. Before, it would just be absolute radio silence in some cases. And I think the what's going on at the Secretary of the Commonwealth's office is they're a little bit more, they're not 100% pit bull, but once you do the simple appeal after the 10 days, and this is the email that you send it to. And so we say appeal and it sounds like some fancy legal thing, but really, I do the thing that I just did to Newton. I don't hear it for anything from them in 10 days, right? I'm going to go and send my original request to that email I just put in the chat and say, I did a request to the Newton School Department. They did not respond. I wish to appeal. Literally, that's it. That's the appeal, right? And the email I put in there it's pre@sec.state.mass.us. And that's how you appeal to the Secretary of the Commonwealth. That's how easy it is. It's like literally, I don't know, a 10-word sentence.
I have to say, I also recently in the last year, I've done a bunch of these in a couple different contexts, and each one I either got a response from the police department that I was requesting the records from, or alternatively, as soon as I sent something to the Secretary of State's office, they were all over it. It's weird. It's hard for me to think of like a governmental agency, the Secretary of State, as like actually advocating for people and like being on the side of people, but for some reason, like they take this public records thing very seriously. So should we address the question someone put in the chat about retribution for filing these? Because I think that's a really interesting question.
I just want to kind of maybe respect the order, because I think,
Oh,
I
sorry.
hope I'm saying that the person's name right. Amira had a question, and I think I answered that in chat, but we can go back to that. But I would like to kind of have Amira ask their question first.
You're a much better facilitator than me, Chris. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Chris, and thanks for hosting this workshop and training. I'm so excited to see a bunch of organizers on here. So my question, and maybe this is kind of basic, but I've never done a records request, is basically, how do you, it is kind of what I put in the chat, which is, how do you know if you're requesting information from the right agency? Like, I was curious when you looked into that person's questions that you went to the city instead of the Newton Police Department. So how do you know when you're requesting information, who you're requesting the information from? And related to that is, you know, as you were writing the request, like, do y'all, and I think this question goes to like a lot of people on this call, have like keywords that you use in records requests? Like, we basically have to know how to ask for what we want, and we also have to know what we want. And that seems like a lot of work to even get to the point of writing a request, right? So I'm just curious how you've kind of, any experience you've had figuring those things out that you can share.
Is one thing that blew my mind is one of the requests you can do is for all the other public requests that have ever been to that agency. I was like, the meta public records request. Oh my God. So someone has asked for, we were trying to hash through that Newton thing, and I didn't really understand. But so one, do it iteratively, or two, go to places like Muck Rock that Nate showed us. Go to like, you can just Google things about school departments, right? Like, just really kind of Google it, and like, what kind of records do they have about complaints? You know, what is the language that they use to call these things? Then I don't do this because I'm an antisocial person. I don't like talking to the cops. So I don't do what David recommended, like actually calling the record keeper at the police or even a school department and asking them. It's a good thing to do. I'm just antisocial and I have a problem doing that. And there's no shame. The thing about, I would go to the bigger organization. I hate going directly to the police. If I can ask the city, they're ultimately responsible. And so I prefer going to the city. It might take longer. Or you can fire all barrels at once. If you can keep track of everything, send it to the city, send it to the police. They both have a responsibility to do it. Maybe one charges you, one doesn't. One gets it faster, one doesn't. I would always do one to the Boston Police Department, and there were like 2 email addresses they had back in the day before they really had the website. And the legal department would always be really crappy, but the records department wasn't. And so I would get a letter from the legal department saying, we're not going to give it to you. And I'm like, that's great, because the records department gave it to me 2 weeks ago. So, you know, it doesn't cost you extra, right?
Can I add something a little bit to that? I think also in terms of formulating the request, right? It's one of those things, like, once you start thinking about what you can do with public records and sort of like what's out there and what exists, I think there's a lot of value in, before you sit down to do a request, to think about, okay, like, what's the goal of my campaign here? What is the goal? Like, what am I trying to accomplish? Is my goal that I want to, combat the number of resource officers with arrest power in the Newton public schools? Just picking up on that example. If so, how can I strengthen my, my advocacy and my campaign to do that? Well, I think one of the ways is to know exactly how active the police resource officers are being in the Newton schools. So that sort of lends itself to the request, right? I think that, I might get some disagreement here from my colleagues, but, just asking for stuff just for the sake of asking for it, while it's fun, it's not going to really further your goal. Asking for stuff because you're trying to accomplish an end will help you so much in figuring out how to phrase it, because once you think about it that way, here is my campaign is trying to work on X. To support that campaign, it would be great to know Y and Z. So there you go, Y and Z, that's what you want. And so that's how that's how I would approach it. I've obviously only approached it in the context of criminal cases. But I think the same holds true for from an organizing point of view. Chris just is kind of a dork, and he really just likes to stay up at night and ask for like what he can find out. But I do think he would agree that it's all towards a goal, right? Like Chris believes very strongly in police accountability, like overarching all the work he does in his various capacities and organizations he's involved in. He's really interested in police accountability. So knowing how many drones there are and knowing, you know, this, that, and the other goes towards that goal.
And one other thing in this, you know, we put it in the police context, but asking for stuff like, I'm doing some stuff with the MBTA right now, right? And not MBTA police, it's just drivers, right? And I don't know anything about bus drivers. So ask for the manual. Everybody, most state agencies, they got a manual. So David was talking about, you know, the people at the drug labs that test stuff. Guess what? They have a manual. You know what's in their manual? A whole shitload of terms, like all of these special XG24. Oh, I want that form, right? So getting police manuals, okay, it uses all their lingo. And, you know, now I know, because I've gotten their manuals before, every time they shoot a taser, they're supposed to fill out the special taser report form, and they're supposed to collect the taser barbs and the confetti and put them in a Ziploc bag, right? And so I don't know, I want an inventory of all the taser confetti in Ziploc bags, right? Like I would never know that if I didn't read the taser chapter of the manual, you know? You can read the manual on the Axion body cam and learn lots about how they're time stamped and, you know, all the accessing and all the stuff, you know, the other kinds of things, not just body camera video, but very specific things about body camera video, for example.
And we also talk to each other. We talk to each other a lot about this stuff. You know, like I'll call Chris and say, I want to get this thing, or I'm trying to accomplish this, and he'll help me figure out what it is I want to ask for. You know, Dave came and talked to a group of law students that I teach, and you know, they were bouncing ideas off him about how to phrase things. Like we're all just figuring this stuff out too as we go along, and how to phrase it and all that. So, you know, this is nothing that anyone learned in law school, that's for sure.
Mm-mm. And we're definitely open to that.
Yeah, and I just want to emphasize. Oh, I was just going to say, I wanted to emphasize, because I can hear some people being a little bit hesitant, like, how do I do this? Don't worry about it. It's nothing. If you do it wrong, you can do it again. Like, bar low, have fun, don't be intimidated. This is intended for regular people to use. So I'm only by way of encouragement. Like,
isn't the requirement of this
screw it up, like you can make
the requirement of this is everyone has to do a public records request tonight, right? Everyone agreed to that by signing up, right? It would be so gangster if all of you did it tonight. All of you. I don't care. This is where I disagree with you. I don't care what you ask for. Just ask for something. You know what? When David was talking about what is example of public records, you know, someone needs to write to Governor Baker and say, I want a list of all the speed dials on his desk phone, right? That's a public record, right? Because it's in a database, I don't know, in some phone system, but that's a public record. So when you think broadly about this, those things are public records. I'm going to get really dangerous. No one flip out. I am not of that kind of ilk. But Hillary Clinton's emails, right? That's what that was all about, right? Because they need to be preserved as public records. Don't hate me for saying that. Don't add anything into that. But it's like, that's what's important about this. Like all of those things are really public records, right?
And Chris and I, we introduced at the beginning, we're part of this committee, this MACDL committee, the community engagement group. We have an awesome committee. A bunch of the people are on the Zoom as well. And we'll help you. I mean, if you want our help, you have an idea, but you want to just talk it through with someone, like, you're the subject matter experts. We're happy to help you, like, try to think about what's out there for your area, and, you know, and how to phrase it. And we can, you know, again, you have Chris's contact information. Mine's up there somewhere. I'm going to send something out as well about how to get in touch with us. But we would love to help if that would be useful to you.
Shira, so Fatima, I just want, Fatima's been saying that she has a follow-up about appeals. So Fatima, why don't you unmute yourself and let's hear the question.
Yeah, hi, it's Fatima. I actually, well, with what Christian was just saying, I want to uplift. Someone asked a question much earlier that we did talk about the appeals a little bit, and I have more to ask about it. But someone asked, do you have to ask for some type of record that already exists versus can you ask for ask a question, right? And I've come up against this of, can I ask, how many of XYZ thing exists? And they might say, well, we don't have a document that says those numbers, and we're not willing to do the work to get you those numbers. So curious about that, the line between, what is actually considered a public record that you can get versus asking them for, some kind of data.
Yeah, so I mean, this is like, we don't have to create. That's true, but there's a record somewhere. And so, well, then you can ask for, a follow-up question. Please tell me what records you keep relating to blah, blah, blah. You don't have to just accept that one answer, like, well, we don't have to create a record. Okay, that's fine. Like, for example, in the one Newton one we were doing before, like, maybe they don't have a list of types of police interactions. So you make a broader request, types of police interactions at the Newton Public Schools. So you make a broader request. I want every police report other than sexual assault from Newton Public Schools. And then you get this list. And then you can ask a follow-up question. Here are 53 police report numbers. Please identify the ones that involve, disorderly conduct, right? Like something like that. I don't know, Christian, you have other ways of getting around, we don't have to create a record?
I mean, it is, sometimes I've asked for that, right? Like, this was some of the stuff that Nate used for his database, was a lawyer had done a long time ago, and said, I basically want a spreadsheet of all the internal affairs records. I don't want the actual documents of like what happened. I just want to say, it was Bill Smith, and it was, failure to wear the uniform properly, or respectful conduct, And I've requested those things, and they go, we don't have that document. And I go, okay, you don't want to create that easy thing? I want all the records then, right? And then they said it's $2,000. And I told them they missed the 10-day deadline, and I got all the records, right? So it's like, we can do this the easy way, or we can do it the hard way. So it's like, sometimes it's in their interest, I would think, to actually create those records. And especially when it's electronic, like saying that record doesn't exist, it's like, it exists in your file system. It kind of does exist. So whether something exists or doesn't exist actually is a little bit of a tricky question, right? My example of Governor Baker's speed dial, it doesn't exist, but it does. It's on his phone. I mean, it does exist. And there's a way that they can get it. Just like copying paper takes some work, creating an electronic document takes a little bit of work. They can try to charge you for that, but it's easier than giving you all of the raw data, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I get that. I'm with you that all of that technically exists, but Sean Williams at the city of Boston is not going to like, do that or make somebody, create that document.
This is being recorded, so I'm not going to make a comment on.
He knows. I email him all the time. It's fine.
I know.
I'll make a comment.
He's like, I'll say it.
I'll make a comment.
It's struggle. It's a struggle. It's a struggle.
Yeah, no.
But I think this underscores the point of take your rejection, right, and turn it into the next request, right? So they say, you know, we don't keep this. Okay, well, then you have to do it this way, right? Like I don't know, that I sort of take, this is an area where I take rejection not as badly as I do in other areas, because I'll just try to just try to, you know, turn it into a better request, or a different request. And it's also like just a lot of trial and error in finding out those magic keywords.
Right. And sometimes you want to do like test ones. Honestly, I'm doing one now, like trying to find out if I can get text messages on Boston Police Department issued iPhones, right? Cops have iPhones, most of them. And I know if I say I want all the text messages that all the cops sent in the last 10 years, I'm probably not going to get that, although they are public records. But so I pick 1 week, a couple of years ago, so it's not open cases, and I'm just some random cop, and I'm like, I want all his text messages. Okay, now if I get them, what's the next step from there? At least that's kind of a proof of concept. And that would be in the category of what Shira says is geeky. It's not related to anything, but it's like, I'm just trying to figure out, can I get this? How much can I get? And then, you know, I'm going to maybe work on like juicier topics that are a bit more relevant. And so it is, you know, it's slow and steady kind of wins the race, I think is really true. Like doing the like targeted thing, like, boom, I'm going to do this one awesome request and it's going to get me absolutely everything I need. That's hard, especially when you're starting.
I think we're at our magic ending time. So I just want to thank everybody so much for joining us for this. I said to Chris in the middle of this, like, I can't stop smiling. I'm really just so happy to do this. And I really want to thank Nathaniel and Dave for doing this presentation and helping with this, and to Chris as well. I will be sending out probably sometime next week an email to everybody who registered for this, asking, again, connecting you to our group, and also you know, asking if there are other of these types of trainings or other ways that we can help you in the awesome work you're doing. So thank you for doing everything you do to make our Commonwealth a better place. It's really, like I said at the beginning, an honor to be in the room with you. So I hope everyone has a great night. Bye.
Hi.
Bye. All right, Chris, we're good?
Oh, wow. Wait, Nate is still here. Oh, so great.